Hello and welcome to this episode of the Sockmatician Podcast. I am Sockmatician, also known as Nathan Taylor, and you can find me on Ravelry, Instagram, Twitter and here on YouTube. This is episode 19 and it is Thursday the 25th of March, something like that. 24th of March I'm being told, and more about who's telling me later. And it is a grey, cloudy, overcast day, but it's not cold, which is nice. There's definitely a spring-like feel to the air. I've got so much I want to tell you. So much. You'll have noticed that I've been joined again by Aloysius the bear, who made such an impression on people last time. This is Abbie Jones from the Bakery Bears, her pattern. And people seem to really like his appearance last time. So I thought I'd do a little theme. Not only is Aloysius joining us again, I've also got a very special guest appearance coming up later in the podcast. So how have you been? It's been lots of fun knitting time since I saw you last. I've actually had quite a bit of time to do some fibre craft stuff, which is a real change, as you'll remember, from what's been going on in my life for the last 6 months to a year. But the most important thing that I want to say today, and I should have said on the last episode, I've missed my podcast anniversary. It occurred to me after I released the last episode that it was probably about a year since I started doing this nonsense, and it turns out I uploaded the last episode exactly a year and 2 days after the first one, so I'd already missed it. Some people make a big deal of a podcast anniversary. I clearly haven't, not by design, but much more by accident, because I don't have any control over what goes on in my life. Since then, it's been quite a year actually, since a year ago, which is something like the 7th of March 2015, I think I released the first one on the 9th of March, something like that. It's been quite an extraordinary year of knitting things. I feel it's been a very successful podcast. What I've really managed to do is reach out and engage with a lot more people. Ravelry is brilliant, and brilliant for getting people knowledge, and you can share friendship with people, but I've taken that one step further forward with the podcast, and I've really got to know a lot of really lovely people. That's all been part and parcely tied up with the Ravelry group as well, because people are going to the group from the podcast, so everything linked together. It's been really lovely to get to know people, and there are people in the group who are much more active than others. I would love to, I'm flaring a little bit, the sun's coming out, or it's just shining through the clouds, so if my face goes a little bit ghostly, it's nothing supernatural. I'd love to engage with people more and more, so there are some people who are very active in the group, and it's really lovely to get to know them, albeit in a cyber capacity only. So that has always been the main focus of doing this podcast, and I've hit over 3,000 subscribers on YouTube, and over the weekend I topped 2,000 followers on Instagram, which is kind of weird, and I don't know how many people I've accepted friendship for on Ravelry, so if you haven't already joined the group, please do. If you haven't subscribed on the YouTube channel, please do. Then you'll always be kept up to date with exactly what's going on here on my channel. Not only the podcast, but for those of you who may be watching this for the first time, I also do tutorials and for different techniques, usually related to double knitting, but not exclusively. So what have I been doing? Well, last weekend, the 18th and 19th of March, I went up to Edinburgh for the Edinburgh Yarn Festival. I actually went up via Birmingham. Ben's father has recently discovered the Birmingham City Symphony Hall as his favourite venue for classical music concerts, and he wanted to share the acoustic of the room with us. That sounds like an odd thing to say, but it's an extraordinarily well-designed building acoustically, and if you look online at Symphony Hall Birmingham, there's all sorts of information about how the shape of the building has all been put together to enhance the acoustic of unamplified performances. And it's really amazing. We sat right at the back, up on the top level. We were on the front row of the balcony there, and we watched the Birmingham City Symphonic Orchestra, I think they're called the Symphony Orchestra, I'm not sure which, and they were playing through some Elgar and some Walton, so it was an English session of music, and it was really lovely. And actually, Richard's right, Ben's dad is right, my father-in-law, the acoustic there is rather special. We could hear every tiny nuance in the music, and of course there's no amplification there. One of the things that really struck me, there's these doors all the way down the side of the upper level and across the back as well behind the auditorium, and depending on the size of the ensemble and the sort of I suppose the loudness or the strength of the music that they're playing, these doors are called sound baffles, and they open them slightly or keep them closed to better allow the sound to reverberate around the room. So it's all very, very scientifically worked out, and of course that kind of stuff appeals to this crazy brain. From Birmingham, I went up on the train to Edinburgh, and this was last Friday. So I was planning to go. I was hoping to go for the whole 2 days, but of course it kind of clashed with our trip up to Birmingham, which had been booked in the diary for a long time, and there was no way I was going to miss out on that. So I went up, although the festival was running on the Friday and the Saturday. I arrived in Edinburgh about 2 o'clock in the afternoon on the Friday, and I'd been invited to go up to Edinburgh by Louise Scollay, who is Knit British, her podcast, which is wonderful, and you should check it out. And what I love about Louise is she champions all things British when it comes to yarn. So her thing is, if it's grown, blended or dyed grown, spun or dyed in Britain, then it's the kind of stuff that she wants to work with and champion, and she does very successfully. And she was running the Blacker Yarns podcast lounge, which is sponsored by Blacker Yarns. There's the plug. And she had contacted me through Laura, who I met on a knit night at Loop in London. She'd been visiting from Edinburgh, and we got chatting, and she said, "Do you know about the Edinburgh Yarn Festival?" I said, "Well, I'm aware of it, but it's a long way away." And she said, "You really should come." She said, "I'll put you in touch with the people who are organising it." I said, "Yes, please do." So she did, and Louise got in contact with me to ask if I wanted to take part in the Podcaster Lounge, which is a brilliant initiative. It's just an area of sofas, so basically a chill-out room in the melee of a big yarn festival, and Edinburgh is quite a big yarn festival. And there were other podcasters there, some that I knew already. Jolie, hello Jolie from Jolie Makes, but I hadn't met in the flesh, and other people as well who I didn't really get the chance to meet properly because we were all so busy doing our own thing. And it was just a nice opportunity for us to meet people who've watched the podcast, to kind of engage with new people who might want to watch the podcast. And I was there with a two-pronged mission. It wasn't just about the podcast itself, but it was to share the double knitting love. So I had taken up a lot of samples of my scarves, and I had officially there were 2 sessions, about 4 hours apart, where I was going to be specifically, I called it demystifying double knitting and trying to take the scare out of it for people and showing people. I was just doing some demonstrations of how it works. So if anybody wanted to drop by and ask questions or look at what's possible, then I was there to demonstrate and show them that. Those 2 half-hour sessions kind of blurred into one. I was basically there doing it all day because it was really popular. There's a constant stream of people coming over to look at the scarves that I've made and to wonder how it's done. So there were a lot of people, I think, who had been a little bit frightened of double knitting before, as many people are. And as you know, fellow O-Satters, I do always say it is just one stitch at a time. And it really is true, and I was able to share that tenet with a lot of new people to the technique. There was one girl, Rhiannon, hello Rhiannon, who is called Stripy Squirrel on Ravelry, and I could just see her brain. I think it works in exactly the same way that mine does, and I don't think she'd ever done any double knitting before, but her brain totally got it. I could tell from the kind of questions that she was asking me that she absolutely understood the technique from just having it described to her, and was asking very pertinent questions. I think she's probably going to have a little try. You might just notice here in the background a little black shadow. Well, there she's disappearing. That's one of my special guests. I have potentially three special guests today, and now's as good a time as any to introduce at least one of them. Viola, come on. No, I don't think Viola's going to come and play. She's more of a stealth animal. Let's have a little look. This is Viola. Hello. Viola is not my cat, as you can see, and she belongs to my very dear friend Abbie, who is staying with us for a couple of days and is sitting just behind the camera over there. And she's waving, but she's going to be making a proper appearance on the podcast in a wee while. And we've got Viola, who's the little black ninja cat over there, and we've got Sebastian, who is her kind of stepbrother, they're not related but they live together, who's around. He's enormous and big black and white fluffy thing, so you may get a chance to have a sneaky peek of Sebastian as well. So those are our guests. They're very, very sweet. Oh, there's, you can just see some ears poking in it. There they are. That's Sebastian. So I was going to introduce them later, but having seen them on screen, it seemed like a good enough moment to do that now. So there I was up in Edinburgh, and I have to say, Joe and Mika, who put the whole event together, and Louise, who organised the Blacker Yarns podcast lounge, have just done such an incredible job. I can't say I've been to that many yarn festivals. I've been to several, and I thoroughly enjoyed all of them. But I think this was my favourite. I really, really do. I had such a lovely time, and it wasn't just because there was a really great selection of vendors there, more about which more in a moment. That's for Elizabeth. And it wasn't just that. It was the people who were behind it. Definitely, Joe and Mika have done such a brilliant job of organising a very community-centred festival. It's large, but it doesn't feel large. It feels very intimate, and that's down to them. They were so welcoming to me. As soon as I arrived, I went up to the information desk and I said hello, and before I even said who I was, "Oh, you're Nathan, come over, we've got a pass for you, it's over here, let me introduce you to Joe, let me introduce you to Mika," and I was in, and it was so welcoming, so friendly, and so lovely, and I think that attitude has carried through the whole organisation for the entire festival. On the Friday night, for example, it wasn't just a 2-day festival and you could go to one or the other or both. There was an event on the Friday evening which was a dinner and a ceilidh dance. Being in Scotland, we had a traditional Scottish ceilidh band called the Picts, who were brilliant, and I have to say I was a little bit nervous. Without wanting to offend anybody, knitting can be quite a solitary activity, and a lot of people who are very involved in knitting find that it takes over their lives and doesn't leave much room for physical activity. Is that a fair thing to say without offending anybody's sensibilities? And yet these dances were so fast and so outrageously energetic. I thought we were going to lose a couple of the participants by the end of the evening. Thankfully, nothing like that happened. There were no injuries, no heart attacks, no one passing out, but we were all sweating buckets. The joy of doing the ceilidh, it was such a great icebreaker. There were enough people there who I knew already from either meeting them at other shows or from shops or people I've got to know over the time, that I wouldn't have needed to have met anybody new, and I would easily have just sat chatting to the people who I knew and like. And that would have been absolutely fine. But the thing with the ceilidh is, because it's the kind of country dancing feel of stuff, you might be with a partner, but you'll be dancing with other pairs of partners, and that rotates all around the room in many of the dances. So you end up at least locking eyes and locking smiles with most of the people who are taking part. And so many people did. It was great. So as soon as the dinner had finished, most people got their knitting out. I was like, oh, that's it. There goes the rest of the evening. Everyone's just going to sit involved in their own needles. But actually, the music was so infectious. Of course, it's all diddly stuff, which you can expect from traditional Scottish music. But it was so brilliantly energetic. They just made everybody want to dance, and everyone got up and had a good go. And I spent most of the evening with John Dunballam of Easy Knits and with Stephen West, and dancing crazily, like mad things, with other people as well, but we were the ones that spent most of our time together, and just by the end of it we were all sweating buckets and giggling like loons. We were having a great time. One of the best things for me about the Edinburgh Yarn Festival was meeting a lot of people that, as I've already said, there were people there that I knew, but there were also people there that I didn't know. So I met some new friends. People who've watched the podcast were coming up and introducing themselves to me, which was lovely. Minxie, hello. It was lovely to meet you. Minxie brought over her... She stopped me as I was walking through the marketplace, to the cafe, and she wanted to show me her Remember cowl, which is the poppy, black and red poppy cowl that I designed. And it's her first ever piece of double knitting, and I believe she was inspired to try because she watches this podcast. If that's not true, Minxie, I'm sorry for misquoting you, but I think that is true. And it was just so lovely to see it. I had only been saying, I've been chatting to Stephen the day before, earlier in the day, and he was saying that one of the things that still gives him a thrill, even though he's a knitting god superstar, is walking around and seeing people wearing patterns that he's designed. And he never gets bored with that, and I think that's really charming. And I said to him, well, I have yet to have that happen, and I will really feel that I've sort of put myself on the map when I go to a yarn show and I see someone wearing one of my patterns. Well, Minxie, you had yours with you, and it was such a delight to see it. And what I really enjoyed was I knew that one of the samples I had over in the Podcasters Lounge was my own original. And she'd chosen the same yarns as I had for mine, so they were absolutely identical. So I said, wait right there, here's a photo opportunity. And I ran over to my bag of scarves, grabbed Remember, and ran back to her. We both put our scarves on, and here's the photograph. So it was really, really lovely to see the two of them together, and it was a big thrill to see somebody else's knitted version of my pattern, not least of which because it was her first double knitted item, and I felt a little bit proud to have been partly responsible for that happening in the first place. So that was a great joy. One of the other really special encounters that I made that I really enjoyed was Jubble 66. Now, of course, we've had plenty of dealings with each other because she's been the recipient of some of Joyce's Stuff for the Boys stitch markers in the past. And I do know that there are people out there who I still owe sets of stitch markers to. I am aware of that. I am working on that. I'm just really bad at admin and things like that. So they will be in the post soon. Linda, Dirty Dog, Christopher, there's lots of people. Yeah. So I will get on with that, and I do have your addresses, so it's fine. I can sort that out. But Jubble 66 came over. I'm just doing everyone's Ravelry names. I think it's easier. I know everyone has other names, and I'm aware of them, and I'm not going to say them, but I think for the sake of clarity, I knew most people by their Ravelry names anyway, so that's what I'm going to stick to for the sake of this podcast. So when she came over, and I was just sitting at my little table with all my scarves, and she introduced herself. Brilliant, how lovely. And she had in her bag a double knitted swatch, which she had started a couple of days before, and was saying that she had been inspired to start because of my enthusiasm on the podcast. I cannot tell you, Osatters, how exciting it is. I'm completely evangelical about getting people double knitting. Well, I've seen tangible proof that it's working, and that makes me so happy. Anyway, her swatch was, it looked brilliant. She was doing it with red and silver yarn, and all red on one side and all silver on the other, no colour changes yet. And she was saying, well, I made a couple of mistakes here, but I know why that was. That was because I wasn't moving the yarns backwards and forwards properly. And she said, I've made one a couple of rows before, and I saw it, and I was able to correct it. It was like brilliant, because as we all know, correcting one's mistakes is the best way to learn how to understand something fully. And she said, but the big problem is my edges are not connecting together. And I said, okay, well, we can fix that for you straight away. Let's look at what you're doing. So I got her to demonstrate what she was doing, and I could see that the twist that needs to happen at the edges wasn't happening in quite the right way. And I was able to say, well, if you lay that yarn over there and then bring that one forward, that'll work. She looked at me, she's like, is that all it is? I went, yeah, it's that simple. I said, so do it a couple more times. And she carried on and was getting it right every single time, and the edges were locking together, and that was brilliant. She was struggling, I hope you don't mind me saying this, she was struggling a little bit with purling with her left hand. Like me, she's an English knitter, and like me, she was trying to knit double-handed for the double knitting, and the knit stitches were okay, but she was struggling with bringing the yarn forward, exactly as I did. When I had this problem when I first started, and my Perplexus scarf was knitted entirely using the Norwegian purl for my left hand. So I said to her, have you thought of or heard about the Norwegian purl or tried it, because it might work for you? It did for me. And she said she hadn't heard of it, so I said, well, let's give it a go. So I completely couldn't remember how to do it, so I borrowed her knitting, and I was like, no, that's not right. No, that's not right. And I said, do you know what, I'm thinking about it too much. And I started talking to her, and I just let my fingers do it. Oh, yeah, there it is. It's incredible how muscle memory can kick in and just take you back to something that you thought you'd completely forgotten how to do. And I demonstrated it to her and showed her how to do it, and it just clicked. It absolutely just clicked, and she started speeding along, and I think she was quite proud of how easy she was finding it. It was like, great, so this has changed your double knitting life, all is good. And she was about to leave, and I said, but you can't go yet. This is the most important thing is yet to be accomplished. Let's do some colour changes. She looked a bit scared. I went, no, it's really, really easy. So just, how many stitches have you got on the needle? 20 pairs, okay. I said, so I want you to knit 7 pairs, and we're going to do a little patch in the middle with the opposite colours. Okay. And so I watched her knitting along, and I was just talking her through it and said, okay, so knit with the red, purl with the silver, knit with the red, purl with the silver. And then we got to the right place. I said, now knit with the silver, purl with the red, and she did. And I went, there you go, done. It was the easiest thing in the world, and she changed the colours without even thinking about it. I said, now do several more pairs like that, and then change back to the other side. And on the return row, we did it exactly the same again, and it was all very easy, and she was delighted. And then after the second row, that's when you can really see the colour change taking place, because at first it's only happening on the needles and you can't really see what you've done. But after that second row, we stopped and we looked at it, and there it was, and it was perfect. It's a lovely little row of contrasting stitches in the middle. And there was such a sense of pride and achievement on her face. It was just on your face. It was delightful. You're watching, I know. Hello. And it was lovely to see that. And I was really pleased that there was the time that we could just sit down together and have this little one-to-one session. It made me feel very warm and cosy inside to be able to share the double knitting love. Who else did I meet? There was Kathy, who runs Stitch Mastery, who is the programmer behind that. I don't know if any of you are using the charting program Stitch Mastery. If you're not, it's brilliant. And she and I were talking about a very, I'm not going to give it away because it's not my place to do so, but a potentially very useful addition to a further update of it. And if she manages to get it working, which I think she will, then it's going to be something that I know I personally will find incredibly useful indeed. So that was a really, really lovely meet-up. But there's so many people. Larissa from Travel Knitter, whose yarns are just so beautiful. If you haven't come across her stuff before, there's I don't know what bases she used. I think most of them have got a little bit of silk content that just gives this amazing sheen, and the colours she uses are so rich and so saturated. And I could go on all day about who I spoke to and whose yarns I really, really enjoyed. But I'll get on to that later on when I'm showing and telling, because there's, as you can imagine, quite a lot of stash enhancement. I set myself a rather lenient budget. I did go up there with in mind saying, well, I'll set aside £200 to spend on yarn, and I very nearly spent every pound of it, but I didn't go over. So even it would have been easy to do so. There were so many lovely things that I wanted, but actually I thought, no, I'll stick to it. It's quite a lot of money. Just got paid from beyond the fence, it's fine. So there's money in the bank, and that was my little treats to myself. So after that, golly, I mean, there's so much more I could say about my time in Edinburgh. I think I'm going to be going back next year and doing some teaching. Oh, the other things that people that I met. Exactly, those were the people that I hadn't known, but the other people that I knew by reputation. I was able to meet some of my knitting heroes in the flesh for the first time, even though we may have corresponded online before, not meeting in the flesh. One of these was the most amazing lady called Amy Detchen. If you don't know who she is, you need to look her up. The spelling is on screen now. She was there teaching some double knitting for beginners classes, and she and I had become aware of each other but had never contacted each other or met in the flesh. And somebody said to me, she said, oh, Amy's over there, and she'd like to meet you, would you like to meet her? So I said, of course, I'm desperate to. And we went over and we chatted for a good long while. She's the most exciting, exuberant character. I absolutely adored her. And she and I are complete kindred spirits when it comes to double knitting. It turns out that when we're teaching our classes, we both use exactly the same design. I'm sure hers is a different stitch count we've come up, but it's the same shape. We both use a heart shape. And we were sort of marvelling at this. And when we discovering why, it turns out our reasons behind it are exactly the same as well. Which I'm not going to go into now. It's not a free class. You can come and join one of my double knitting classes and find out for yourself why. But that was great. We were completely in sync with that kind of thing. and I enjoyed meeting her enormously. One of my other knitting heroes is Tom of Holland. He and I feel I've got to know Tom really well online, but we've never met in the flesh, and he was up there as well. We met at the Ceilidh and we had a good old chat. Tom is a really, really interesting person. If you haven't come across him, his big thing is visible mending and the visible mending program that he's part of. It's all about darning and embroidering and fixing rips and tears and holes and wearing thin places, but doing it in a way that's very visible, using specifically contrasting yarns or doing them decoratively, doing the repairs decoratively. And it's really fascinating, and it's really made me change how I feel about mended knitwear. Before, I would be really upset if it didn't look perfect anymore, but now here's a way of actually making a feature out of your darning, and it's changed the way I look at it. And he's fascinating, and he's brilliant at it, and he's a real technique knitter. He goes into the absolute, he'll learn everything there is to know about a certain technique and perfect it and become really more than proficient at it. And I love that. I love the focus and the commitment and the clarity in his brain that allows him to do that. Wouldn't it be great if we all had the time? But maybe he's just better at it than I am and does it really super quickly, I don't know. But he was wearing a vibrant red jumper, which he'd knitted himself, and it was all on a tiny, tiny gauge. It was fingering weight yarn, I think he said it was like 2.75 or 3.25 needle, but really, really tiny. And it was just beautiful. Really, it didn't look like a hand knit. I mean, it had such a professional finish to it. I know a lot of people don't like it when they get told their knitting looks like it could have been made on a machine, but actually that's surely a huge compliment. And one of the things that struck me about his jumper was the seaming across the shoulder. It was really, really visible, and it looked a bit like a sort of I-cord stitched across the top, and it was fascinating. I said, well, how have you done that? And what it was is he did a 3-needle bind-off, which is usually done with all the workings on the inside, so you just get the two edges of the material across the top coming together with a lovely, beautiful, tidy seam, which I've used myself, and it's great fun to do. It's really easy, and it keeps everything lined up really easily, so you don't get the stitches out of sync with each other because you're literally working them in pairs together. And it works brilliantly well, but he did his with the bind-off on the outside, and it's really decorative, really, really nice. And then he took me over to his partner, Anthony, who was wearing another jumper that he'd made, and he'd taken that one step further, and these visible seams were not only on the shoulders of this jumper, but they were also all around the armholes, and made a real feature of it. Brilliant. I loved it. I'm not sure Anthony was too pleased at having the strange men, well, me, he knew his partner clearly, but he didn't know me, sort of having a feel and a poke around of the jumper that he was actually wearing, but he took it very placidly and didn't seem to be that bothered. And then I also met another huge hero of mine, Nancy Marchant. Now, if you're not aware of who Nancy Marchant is, you probably should. She literally wrote the book on brioche knitting, and knitting brioche and knitting fresh brioche, I think are the two titles, or fresh knitting brioche. And she's just got a new book out called Leafy Brioche, and her designs are absolutely brilliant. And she's responsible, I think, for standardising all the notation for brioche knitting and for charting it out, coming up with all the symbols and a lot of the terminology. And she's also innovated so many new things. And it's fascinating talking to her about how she does all of that. Sometimes she does it on the needles, but sometimes she'll look at the chart symbols and she'll just play around with them on the page and say, oh, that's a interesting combination of symbols. I wonder what that looks like when it's knitted. And there it is, she's come up with this whole new stitch, a whole new technique. It's brilliant. And she was delightful to meet, and she's got a naughty, mischievous sense of humour, which I appreciated very, very much. And she's very kind and generous. She was teaching brioche class while she was up there, and while we were chatting, she said, wait right there. And she ran off, and she came back with the worksheets that she'd been using in her class as a little gift for me to take away to experiment with. It has all sorts of different types of tuck stitches. So there's brioche itself is a type of tuck stitch, and she's been working on a lot more different types of tuck stitches. You can look all that up on YouTube and find out exactly what that is. But it's basically about bringing yarns tucking them up underneath layers of stitches above. I've probably butchered that definition, Nancy, I'm sorry, but it's something to do with that, and you'll love it, and I can't wait to get stuck in. So that was really, really nice, and although she and I have communicated a little bit on Ravelry, it was really nice to meet her in the flesh and just get to know her as a human being, which is surely what the internet is all about. It's a catalyst to springing people into real life encounters, right? Isn't that why we're here? Yes, I hope so. So I'm going to keep this fairly short. I've been waffling on about that for already half an hour, so I want to crack on. I think it's probably time to introduce my very, very special guest, who is a very close friend of mine, who's called Abbie Jones. She's a singer and an actress. Those people who have seen Computer Says Show, the documentary that went with our Beyond the Fence production, will be familiar with Abbie. I'm just making room. Aloysius, you can come and join me here. We'll be familiar with Abbie because she was the one who was singing Not a Day Goes By. Come on in the recording studio.
Hello.
And this is Abbie. Hi Abbie, what are you knitting today?
I am knitting some fingerless gloves on Easy Knits. I think it's Elsa.
Yep.
The reason I liked it was because it's very sparkly.
It is very sparkly.
And we figured that because it's such a beautiful colour change, we didn't want to do anything too busy with it, but it's got a very lovely little kind of cable coming across. I'm not sure if that's going to come up very well.
Let me take this over to the camera. Is this your pattern, or is this one that you
No,
found?
this is one I found on Ravelry called Tiara by Rachel C, I think.
Right, brilliant. I should look that up and put that on the screen. The cable pattern is really, really lovely. It's very simple. Is it a 2x2 rib? It is, isn't it?
Yeah.
So most of the glove is a 2x2 rib, which stretches out very nicely. It looks really tiny. It doesn't look like it's going to be on anyone's hands, but there's so much give in it. And then across I guess that's the back of the wrist, is it?
Yes. Yeah.
That's a really, really beautiful cable. And is that just the one? There's just that one motif, or does that?
Yeah, no, that's it. So I was possibly thinking with putting it on the back of the hand, maybe experimenting with that a little bit.
Yeah.
When we get to that point.
So how long are these gloves meant to be?
I guess it depends on how far you want it to go up the hand.
Right.
So I probably will take it up to my knuckles,
right.
Maybe a little bit further.
And how far up the wrist should it extend? So about there?
Yeah, to about kind of 2 inches-ish.
Yeah. It's really, really pretty. And this is, of course, John Dunballen's yarn as well.
Yes.
Now, can I say something really contentious?
Yes, you may.
I know it's really, really popular at the moment, but for me, I can't imagine myself knitting anything with the sparkly yarn.
Oh, right, okay.
I love the colours. The colours of this are absolutely gorgeous. John's colours are always lovely, and he'll kill me if I said anything different. But it's generally true. I bought lots of his stuff at the weekend, so I can prove that very shortly. But I think because of, my thing about stuff for the boys.
Yeah.
And I know I shouldn't make sweeping generalisations that sparkling's just for girls, but it really is, isn't it? So I don't mean to make real sort of gender-specific statements like that. God knows I really shouldn't be saying things like that. But as far as I'm concerned, I would want the colours without the sparkle.
Without the sparkle.
However, it's perfect colours for you.
Yes.
Abbie is the girl of purple.
Yes, I do have a purple dress on.
She does, and often has purple. Your hair's not purple at the moment,
no.
But often has a purple tinge to her hair. And are you enjoying knitting that one? Is it a fun?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's nice and straightforward. My last knit was a bit complicated, so it's nice to go back to something that is quite easy and knit up quite quickly. Yeah. And also something for me. Because I've been knitting a lot for other people.
What have you been knitting for? Is it all good stuff?
No, just kind of things I've promised to people. So I knitted another pair of fingerless gloves for a friend who gave me some lovely Aran wool, because she just didn't know what to do with it. So I knitted her up some fingerless gloves for that.
Oh, so it was a gift for you, but you gifted it straight back.
Yeah. I've got loads of it, so I've got more, but just a little bit for her as well. And what else did I do? I've done a wheel Wuppertal. I did another Wuppertal.
Is that your fourth?
Yes, I think it might be my fourth.
Yeah. And who was that for?
That was for my friend Janos, who's a drummer at church.
And what colour was that?
That was in a lovely kind of deep red.
Right.
Sort of
bordering onto maroon, or sort of
quite a vibe, like not vibrant as in bright, but yeah,
vivid.
Yeah, vivid
Saturated.
deep red. He wanted something kind of red, so
Nice.
that worked.
Nice.
I think I've only ever done red for your Vupatal, actually. I've done various reds.
Did you do a grey one as well?
No, they've all been red.
Oh, interesting.
It's crazy.
If you're not aware of my Vupatal pattern, it's free!
Yay!
And it's on Ravelry, and the name is right here because it's a funny spelling. It's Germantown. And it's been really, really popular. It's had thousands of downloads, which I think is only to be expected when something's free. That's not any indication that it's the best hat pattern in the world, but it is the cheapest. And well, I suppose I could make it cheaper by giving money away to people when they downloaded it, but I'm not going to start doing that.
No.
That would break the bank. It's a fun knit. It's again mostly 2x2 rib, but it has on 1/4 of it. It has a variation of a basket stitch, sort of 2x2 in rows and stitches. I think it's actually 2x4, isn't it? But the knitted part of it has like a half cable twist, which just adds a little extra bit of texture to it. It's really kind of fun. I look like I've got a halo from where I'm sitting behind me today, so I might just move over to the side, or I might not care. And what else are you knitting? Are you monogamously knitting these mitts?
Yes, I think at the moment I am. Oh no, I lie. I have a very nice alpaca that I bought from the Isle of Wight. I even walked an alpaca called Vivaldi. He was lovely.
And do you happen to know if the yarn you've got comes from Vivaldi?
No, because Vivaldi was kind of cream, and the alpaca yarn that I've got, and it's natural colour, but it's kind of the kind of dark blacky brown.
Right.
So I don't think it's from him. But it was very lovely to walk them. They were great. And they were incredibly soft. Yeah, fairly friendly. Yeah.
I've never come up close and personal with an alpaca, and everyone who watches this will know that I love alpaca yarn.
Oh yeah.
Does it feel the same on the animal? Does it have the same kind of texture that you would expect?
It's a little bit more dense, but it is as soft, definitely. Like especially kind of around the ears and on the kind of mane and stuff. Right. So yeah, it was really fun.
And is he quite tall? Or was he
no, he was a little alpaca. An alpaquette, yes. We did see they have basically a stud farm in the Isle of Wight, and they only breed for yarn. They don't breed for anything else. I mean, there are people that eat alpacas, and they are bred for meat, but not in my household. No. So they are bred for their wool, and also for.
Abbie's vegetarian.
I am. Also for fairs. There's like an alpaca show. It's like crafts for alpacas.
I wouldn't be at all surprised. There seems to be, there's fancy rat shows as well. There's any animal that you can breed and have a perfect example. Example. Oh, look, there I did it again. Air quotes. Any animal that you can be perfect, you can show. And I don't.
Well, they have some pretty amazing alpacas on the farm.
So you've got the dark brown alpaca. And what weight is lace weight, isn't it?
Lace weight, which I've not done a lot of before, and I'm finding, I guess, I don't know if it's partly the way that I knit or the pattern, or I kind of wanted something long that I could kind of, cozy up into, but also something with a little bit of a design. So I've stuck fairly standard with kind of a basic yarn over sort of symmetry thing going on.
So is it mostly holes, or is it the sweep of the decreases that make a pattern up?
It's mostly, so if you imagine it's about that wide, holes will be travelling up the outside with a little bit of a border, and then the inside has a little bit of a raised kind of line going up the middle. But it's not proving as enjoyable to knit, just because I'm not so familiar with. I like things like tight. I do like knitting tight gloves and things.
In this household, we never talk about tight knitting, do we?
Not?
No, we talk about dense knitting.
Okay.
I'm a dense knitter.
Yes.
And Abbie's a fairly dense knitter as well.
Yes.
I think my tension is changing.
Oh really?
I think I'm getting a little less dense. I'm not going to say looser, because it's not a judgment thing. It's not good or bad. It's just different. Dan and Kay of the Bakery Bears, they always hello Dan and Kay. I know you're going to be watching. They always talk about, or Kay is always sort of gently ribbing. There's a knitting pun. Ribbing down about being a tight knitter, and how for him to get gauged, she always has to give him slightly larger needles.
Yeah.
But some people look upon that as a bad thing. I genuinely don't. I think it's a different type of texture, and as long as you're happy with the fabric that you're creating, then that's all that matters. And if it's a sized garment, then obviously gauge matters. And then if you have to change needle sizes to get gauged, that doesn't change the way you knit.
No.
It just changes the overall effect. But if it's a scarf or something that really doesn't matter, or a shawl or something like that, I think I like a dense fabric. I like the feel of it.
Yeah, definitely.
Although I think certainly my sock knitting is not quite as dense as it used to be. I used to always use an 80 stitch pattern for socks, which is a lot. And that was always, in fairness, that was always on a 2mm needle. The socks I'm knitting at the moment tend to be on a 2.25. Not a huge amount of difference, but I'm finding that a 72 stitch count is actually a little bit loose. So I probably should experiment and see what I would be like on a 2mm needle with 72 stitches. That might be about right.
Yeah.
But that's definitely a change. And again, this is a vanilla sock, whereas in the past I've done a lot of cabling on socks, so it might be that was having, well, it will be that was having a big effect. But I'm sure I did knit some plain footed socks, even if there was cabling on the back, and that was always 80 stitches, and they were kind of roomy but not loose. And then now I'm down to 72, so something's changing.
Wow.
I'm just popping back in to say, Ian, Abbie's husband, has now arrived. He's waving, but he is waving at the back of the camera. And he's brought with him Abbie's other work in progress. I put the light on now because it's done with very dark wool. Abbie, please tell us what you're doing.
So this is the alpaca scarf that I was talking about earlier from the Isle of Wight alpacas. And we were talking about kind of lace weight, but the idea of doing yarn overs and creating a sort of pattern. How does that's a bit better, just kind of...
Actually, if I put this up behind it, can you see?
There you go, sort of thing. So it still has a nice kind of pattern to it. You can't quite tell, but the middle bit there, the thick line, that's actually raised up. So.
And what's making that raise up? Is it just?
I think it's a twisted stitch, or a knit through a slip, not a knit through the back. Something. So it does raise on the top.
It's really lovely yarn. It's got. Is it pure alpaca?
It is pure alpaca, 100% alpaca, and it's also not dyed. So this is the colour of
whichever animal it came off. It's really lovely, and I like the textures at the edges.
So once it's blocked, it'll probably look a lot nicer than.
Are you going to stretch it out quite a lot?
Not too much, but I just needed to keep it plain, I think.
It's quite diaphanous, isn't it? What size needles is that on? Are they 5 now?
I think it might be 4s or 5s. Not much more than that.
They're quite big.
They're quite big. I do tend to knit most stuff on a 4 unless I'm doing something smaller than that.
It's really lovely, and the yarn is really, really fine. I know clearly it's very sweat, but it's let's show that up to camera. There's not much of it.
No.
It's really, really tiny, and it's got that lovely, that unctuousness that alpaca often has. A real sense that it feels oily, but it's not.
Yeah.
It's just a sheen to it. There's no lanolin in alpaca, so they don't have the grease that sheep wool has. And I think it's going to be incredibly warm, even though it's so light.
I think the priority for me was length, but with a bit of detail in. I didn't want it just to be a complete knit.
And how long do you think you'll want to make it?
Well, I've got 2 50-gram balls, so I'll keep going until.
Litres. Do you think you'll need to use it all?
Probably not. I'll see.
We'll see. And there we are. That's what Abbie's been knitting.
Thank you.
Shall we dig into stash enhancement?
There's some very exciting things in this, I have to say.
Abbie's already seen all this. I showed it to her last night. But should we do stash enhancement first, or should we do? Yeah, let's do stash enhancement because I'm excited.
It's very exciting.
So I bought, as I say, £200 worth of yarn when I was up. The lighting here is really, really bad. We look totally bleached out, and usually it's a grey day. It's not that there's bright sunshine coming through, but it's like scary. So I spent quite a lot of time with John and James as well. James, who was on John Dunballam's stall with him. James is a fascinating knitter. Now, everybody knows I'm really interested in people's techniques. I'm always banging on about Abbie. So how do you wrap your yarns? How do you which finger do you use?
Yeah.
I'm always asking people how they knit, and I love it. I have never, ever seen someone knit the way James knits.
Really?
He knits with his left hand,
Okay.
and he's a thrower,
Yeah.
which is bizarre in itself, but he's not mirror knitting. He's not knitting in the opposite direction from standard.
Okay.
He's still knitting from his left needle to his right needle, but he's not doing continental at all. He's throwing the yarn with his left hand. Never seen anything like
Wow.
it. How he tensions his yarn. I actually don't have anything to hand. Can I borrow your knitting?
For free?
I'm not going to knit with it.
Sorry?
But how he tensions his yarn is something like, it goes over the back of his fingers and then down. I think it's sort of on his,
Kind of a...
down that
Yeah.
way, and he sort of flicks it either with his thumb, flicks it round, or with one of his sort of lower fingers flicks it round. It's
Yeah.
mind blowing. And he and John first met when John was teaching a class, and John jokingly says that James was the problem child in the class because everyone else was doing very standard knitting and was flying with the technique, and John had to spend quite a lot of time with James trying to adapt what he was doing to suit James's knitting style. He knits so quickly. I mean, he clearly he's been doing it all his life. He's been knitting since he was 5 or 6 years old, and he's now in his early 30s. So he's got a good lot of experience at it, and it clearly works for him. But what I really wanted to do was film him doing it so I could share it with you. I didn't do that, so I might actually get him to film himself knitting and send it, because it is so unusual, and it's just brilliant. I loved it. Anyway, I spent quite a lot of time at their stall because John has so many gorgeous, sumptuous colourways, and I bought several of them. He does some yarn cakes in gradients, and this is one called the Big Boy cakes. The Big Boy is one of his bases, and he calls this a gradient, spelt Greydient, which is brilliant, and I love it. I'm all for a bad pun. And they're beautiful. You get 100 grams in 5 mini skeins of 20 grams each. And each one is, this base is 70% Exmoor Blueface, 20% alpaca, get in, and 10% nylon. And it's a 4-ply fingering weight, but it looks thicker than most fingering weights. It's very lofty, so it's got nice softness to it. But here is the Greydient, and it's really, really lovely. So each one of these, as you can see, is a separate ball. And it's focusing on me rather than not. And there's John's new logo, newly designed and freshly unleashed at the Edinburgh Yarn Festival, easyknits.co.uk. So if you haven't come across his stuff, head over to his website because some of his colourways are utterly, utterly gorgeous. This one notwithstanding, I absolutely love it. It's showing up on here a little bit sort of more cream colour, and it's actually a very sort of silvery grey. I think that's the alpaca content. It's very, very silvery. I don't know how he does it. Very clever stuff. So I'm going to pair that with another yarn of Big Boy that I bought from him, which is this one here. Oh, purple for Abbie! It's showing up a little bit darker on camera than it is. It's quite a subtle, it's not pastel-y, but it's quite
almost
a subtle.
a dusky purple.
And it's quite heathered. You can see there's good depth to it, which I really, really love. And I think working with these greys, it's going to be lovely. My plan for it, I don't have a pattern yet, but my plan for it is to do a cowl. I want to do quite a sort of high standing cowl, using the grey as the background colour, the purple, I'm saying grey but waving the purple at you, using the purple as the background colour, and using these for the motifs, so the gradient of the motifs will change as you go up, whilst the background colour will remain solid or heathered. It's really, really lovely, and it's called Purpleness, and it's again the Big Boy base, which is 70% Exmoor Blueface, 20% alpaca, and 10% nylon. And it's 150 grams. So there's loads of it. There's 100 grams in here. There's 150 here. So the yardage is 500 meters. Marvelous. That should be possibly 2 cals out of that. I don't know.
Wow.
If I really like it, maybe there's a gift for somebody in my family. But I've got some knitworthy family members, which is great. I then hopped across to the John R. Bond stall. Everybody knows that I'm a big fan of the Knit by Numbers. It's so reasonably priced, I can't believe it. And it's so lovely. And I got 2 colours. And I bought these for Ben, thinking Knit by Numbers is so deliciously soft. It's 100% merino, but they mill it in a way that it's lofty and it blooms and it's just really lovely. And Ben loves sort of autumnal colours, so I bought these. This is the Knit by Numbers range. It's a maroon and a deep brown. It's KBN, which stands for Knit by Numbers, KBN 74, which is this one, and KBN 07, which is the brown. And I thought Ben's going to love these, and he really does. He really liked the colours and touched it and went, ugh! I can only knit in acrylic for my husband.
Tragedy.
It is really bad. So, people may remember stories of how unknitworthy he is. I mean, the 2 things I have knitted for him immediately got left on the tube. A hat and a shawl. So I have replaced them and he's been better at it, but hat number 1 and shawl number 1 disappeared. Although somebody did say once, how lovely that somebody will have picked that up and hopefully will be wearing it and go, oh, that's lovely. I mean, I hope it's not just languishing in lost property at London Underground, but if someone has found it and appropriated it for themselves, I hope they're getting enjoyment out of it. So I don't yet know what this will be. I do want to work the 2 colours into something together. This year I've decided that I need to get better at stranding.
Okay.
My Fair Isle is so lamentably bad. I've done so little of it, and because I've got carried away so much with double knitting, which is so forgiving in terms of tension, that I've never really had to concentrate on the tension, the stranding, the floats, and it's either I do it so loosely that although the floats across the back are nice and loose, that all the stitches bulge and flop around, or if I get the stitches on the front working nicely, then the floats are too tight and it all puckers up. So I need to practice that, which is why I want to do a stranded cowl rather than a double knit cowl for this. Although there is a lot of yarn here, and if I did it with double knitting, it would mean that I get the reversibility of having this as the outside colour and this is the motif colour as well on the inside.
Choices.
I don't know. I hadn't even thought about that until I've just said it out loud, and maybe this isn't going to be a stranded project after all. But this will be. So I don't know what it'll be, and I don't know who it'll be for. It won't be for my husband, but I'll find something lovely to do with it. It's really nice.
And soft. It is so soft. I can't believe that.
You feel like there's something else going on in there, and it is just 100% merino. I don't know how they do it. And it's really generous yardage. It's 250 metres per 100 grams. It's DK weight. And it's very reasonably priced as well. 100 grams of this DK weight is only £10 at their stalls. Certainly, I don't know what the price is online. It may differ slightly. But only £10. It's like, that's amazing. And I met John as well. We were chatting, and because we met at the Cayley, and then the next day I passed by and we had a nice little chat.
Yeah.
So he's lovely. And I love what they do. Brilliant stuff. Gorgeous. I love that back. It's mine.
Yours.
There's also here's another of John Dunballam's. This is his Deeply Wicked. The colourway is Audrey 2, and I don't believe I've seen it before, but he says it's one of his earliest colourways and his most repeatable colourways and perennially popular. Audrey 2 is obviously the plant in Little Shop of Horrors, and these colours are just... It's not your normal colours, is it? But your amazing. Eyes light up when you see it. Yeah. It's down here. Look at this. It's just fabulous. It's so bright and so vivid and so saturated. And it's got, the phone can't even cope with how amazing this is. The camera's, it's bright green, red, yellow and orange. Ben calls it the traffic lights yarn, which I can see what he means if you sort of combine all the yellow. It's bleaching out. That yellow is flaring with the camera too much. It's too much for an iPhone camera to cope with. But it really is absolutely gorgeous. And the base is 100% superwash merino. It's 4-ply fingering weight, and it's 400 metres, very standard, 100 grams. And really, really lovely. It's the yarn, the Deeply Wicked is the yarn that I made the piano number 2 scarf in the lime green. So the black was Malabrigo, but it's lovely to knit with. It's very, very smooth. I think that's the superwash aspect of it. It feels nice going through the fingers. It barely pills at all. It doesn't bloom very much. It's a really high twist, so it's great for stitch definition. And I can't recommend it highly enough. I just look at those colours. Actually, the further away I get, the more accurate the colours become. But it's so lovely how I'm going to try how the yellows and the greens sort of blend into each other. That's not just a different shade of green. It's hard to see there, but take my word for it, it's gorgeous. That was that. Then I came across a skein of a yarn that I was unfamiliar with. The company is Indigo Dragonfly. They're a Canadian company, and their website is indiodragonfly.ca, which is, assuming Canada. It's not China, is it? It's Canada, because they were Canadian, sure. And it's the base is called Chameleon Sock, and it's 63% superwash merino, 20% cashmere, and 17% silk. What are you trying to do to me? Oh, it's just so lovely. But what's really interesting about it, I'll show it to you in a minute. I'm sort of building up the tension. What's really interesting about it is I believe that the silk is not blended throughout the fibres. I think it's only one of the 4 plies. It's going to be probably impossible to show that on camera, but there's a weird sort of barber polling effect with not different colours, but every 4th twist is shinier and sheenier, and I think that's the silk. I think that's how they've done it. I'd be interested to know if anyone knows for sure and can let me know. But here it is. Look at that. It's sort of this purplish grey. It's a grey, isn't it? You'd say that's a grey, but it's definitely got a purple hue to it. Fading through paler greys and creams into this vibrant egg yolk gold. It really, I mean, if you saw that, you'd never think that that was at the other end of it. It's so, so lovely. And let me see if I can get any... Oh, you can see it. It's not the whole thing is shiny. It literally is every 4th twist, which is why I think it's just one of the plies. You can see little specks there. Can you see that strand that's going across the opposite way? There you can clearly see what I'm talking about. And from a distance, it almost looks like, it's kind of reflective, isn't it? It looks like a reflective material. You know how on a coat for cyclists you have those reflective patches where it doesn't catch the light in the way that something normally does and makes the eye go a little bit odd. Well, this is the same way, and it's really lovely. It's really soft. It's too nice for socks. I know it's called Chameleon Sock Yarn, but I don't want to be lulled into thinking that it's going to work for socks. I know the silk content in it probably will act as a bit of a reinforcement, but I don't want to waste it on something that I'll wear 10 times and wear through. So it's so, so nice. I genuinely don't know what I'm going to do with this. I've broken my most usual rules for buying yarn. Normally I only buy yarn. I don't know what you're like with buying. Do you just buy it because it's pretty?
Mostly, or soft.
I buy things when I know I've got a project in mind. I go out looking for the exact thing, I buy it, I knit with it. I've bought so many single skeins of yarn with no actual plan. I couldn't help myself.
That's
it's
my way.
just lovely. I have got to the stage now where I think the 2 big boxes I've got from IKEA aren't quite now enough. So I need a 3rd one. Oopsie. Oh well, that's gorgeous. Love it. Can't wait to start working with it, but I don't know when. It's going to sit in stash for a while. I've got too much else to do. Don't care. It's just nice to look at. Now, one of the big stars of the Edinburgh Yarn Festival, as far as I can tell, was Rachel Atkinson, who is knitting-tastic on most of the platforms. But she is daughter of a shepherd. Now, she genuinely is the daughter of a shepherd. And her father herds Hebridean sheep, which are really cute and really tiny, and they've got really lovely faces. They've got sort of long horns, with really twisted horns that curl back on themselves, and very sweet faces. If you don't know what a Hebridean sheep looks like, look them up. They're kind of cute. And she was telling me the horror stories about the hardships that face shepherds in this country and flock keepers and owners, I suppose. She was saying that unless you have a rare breed of sheep, you can't sell the fleeces privately. It all has to go through the wool board. And last year, I hope she won't mind saying this because and I think it's worth people knowing. Last year, the fee, her father, there's 500 sheep that he manages. The fee that he got from the wool board was £9.40, and I said, per fleece, that doesn't sound like very much. She went, no, in total.
It's baffling.
That upsets me so much. I can't. I said, well, that's not even enough to cover the costs of shearing them, let alone the product itself. So this year, she's been embarking on a voyage, really, of discovery of how to turn her father's yarn from fleeces into yarn. So it's on her blog, which I'll link to, or I'll show here. And what she's done is she's had to learn about scouring the yarn and getting it professionally cleaned, the fleeces, and then getting it milled. And then she's actually used the John Arbonne mill. She went to him at a yarn fair with a sample of the fleece and said, is this something, can you work with this? And he was like, yeah. So what she's done, especially for the Edinburgh Yarn Festival, which is where she released it, it's a limited edition run of Hebridean, pure Hebridean yarn skeins. It's DK weight, which is really, really versatile and useful for lots of things. And it is so unusual. I'm now going to show it. This is undyed. This is the colour of the sheep themselves. They're all this almost jet black. It's a very, very dark brown. But it does have little guard hairs of alternate colours. But it's got this wonderful shine quality to it. Even though it's not a smooth yarn by any stretch. It's quite rustic is the trendy word for it. But it's not rough. I mean, I could easily wear that against my skin, and I know I have quite a high tolerance. It has a feel. It doesn't have the drape of alpaca, but do you know what I mean? It has a feel a bit like the guard hairs on alpaca are quite similar in feel to that. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it's really, really lovely, and it was definitely a highlight. Yeah, Abbie's doing the sniff test. This smells like no wool you've ever smelled. It's really strong. It's obviously been through incredible processes and yet retains. It's farmyard. It's not pooey. It's absolutely not sheep pooey, but it's so lovely, and everybody was talking about the smell of this yarn. Honestly, at Edinburgh, everywhere you went, people went, have you been to Daughter of a Shepherd? Oh yeah, have you smelt it? And people just like, when you talk about, people jokingly talk about getting drunk on yarn fumes at a yarn festival. Yeah. This is why. It genuinely is why. It's so lovely. I live in a city. I'm in the country.
Yeah.
I'm absolutely in the country, and yet it's completely clean. There's no lanolin left in it or any dirt. It's gorgeous, and it just happens to smell divine. So Rachel, thank you so much. She said to me when I bought it. Thank you much for providing it, was the question. When I bought this skein, it was one of the last purchases of the day, and I was hoping she'd still have some left. I didn't buy any on the first day, and by the time I got to the Cayley and realised that everybody was talking about it, I thought, she's not going to have anything left. So I did go back, and she did have one. I went, I can't let you take all of this home, so this was coming home with me. She said, would you like a bag? I've got a tote bag. I was like, yeah, absolutely. I thought, well, brilliant, lovely, thank you very much. I didn't realise she was selling them, and I just walked away with it. And I have spoken to her afterwards, and I said, I'm so sorry if this wasn't a gift and if I've inadvertently stolen this bag. She went, no, it was a gift, it's fine. So thank you, Rachel. But these are the bags. This is her logo. So it's a young lady, thank you, Abbie. It's a young lady who is, actually hold up both corners, there you go. Young lady in traditional old dress with a shepherd's crook, walking a lamb on a lead. It's really, really lovely. So she's had all this specially designed. And the labels also, that's too itching out with a stupid light, also look really, really lovely there. And it's just lovely. So this is limited edition yarns, 100% British wool. So Louise at Knit British would be delighted by it. And it says on the back, Shepherd John Atkinson from the Escrick Park Estate, yarn from Hebridean sheep, 23rd of July clip. So this was only shorn off the beast in July last year. It's a DK weight. It's scoured and spun in the UK, and it's 233 metres per 100 grams. And it says cool hand wash only, and you can go to daughterofashepherd.com to find out more. Now, I know Rachel was agonising about whether or not she should repeat this as a yarn, because it's been so popular, but she's decided not to. And I think she's done the right thing. She's still going to provide Hebridean yarn for next year, to this year's crop, but she's going to mill it in a completely different way.
Okay.
So it won't be the same as this yarn. This really is a sort of one-off batch. And it seems that, talking to John as well, some people at yarn festivals get quite cross when they come back and say, have you got any of the such and such? And people say, no, that was limited edition. And they get quite annoyed with it. I think that makes it incredibly special.
Yeah.
And I love the idea that this is limited edition. I love the fact that this is never going to happen again. Those sheep and this method of yarn production. It'll still be the same fibre, but it will be very, very different. But that means that this is kind of special.
Yeah.
I love that. So well done, Rachel. I know it's been a really emotional journey for you, because you have such personal connections to this fibre and now this yarn, and you've learnt so much doing it. I can't congratulate you highly enough, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. And then the other single skein purchase that I made, Abbie's already giggling because she loves it.
I think it is my favourite.
Now, there was a stand on in the festival for the Buffalo Wool Company from Texas, and they only sell one type of fibre, and it's bison. It's amazing. This particular yarn base is called Sexy.
Why not? Yeah, I did notice.
Called Sexy.
Yeah.
And it's 50% bison down. We're not even calling it hair or wool, it's bison down, because it's the inner hairs, the sort of insulating hairs that keep them warm in like ridiculously cold winters. And 50% silk. It sends me crazy. This is lace weight. I don't know what I'm going to do with it. I just wanted to own it. This is lace weight. It's about 400 yards to 50 grams. And it is only a 50 gram skein, but it seems like there's quite a lot of it. And it was quite expensive. It was definitely my luxury treat to buy to myself. It was £34 for the 50 gram skein. But when I saw it, I just couldn't leave it.
Yeah.
Are you ready? Look at this. Let's just pause everything we're doing and look at that for a little while. No words needed. It's lovely, isn't it?
That's really nice.
These colours are so beautiful. They're all they manage to be at once rich and muted, and I don't really know how that works. They're really vibrant, but they're not garish in any way. Even this lovely sort of streak of turquoise that goes through, it's clearly dyed over the... You can see that bison down is not white, I think, because you can see, can't you, coming through, that this is dyed on top of a darker yarn. I don't know if you can get the sense of that on camera, but I think maybe it's that's giving them sort of muted aspect to it, or maybe it's just the colours they've chosen to dye with, but it really feels like there's the gold, there's the green, there's the brown, there's the red, there's the turquoise, and yet they all tie together, aren't they? I think that's the base colour showing through.
They're very natural as well. They feel like it's not an exaggerated colour. It's a very, like a kingfisher blue or a grassy green.
The
it's
best
really
colours that nature can provide.
Yeah,
I think that's very true, and I think they just work. This was the only colourway they do in this particular yarn base. So if you wanted this yarn base, it was going to look like this. And I thought that was kind of an odd choice, but then I thought, well, no, it's just gorgeous. Why would you want anything else? All of their other types of yarn base, they had various different concentrations of bison to other fibres, had different... None of them looked like this, so this really is a one-off for this base. And I love it. It's got a very unusual texture.
Yeah.
And I don't know how to describe it.
No.
Put it into words for everyone at home.
Oh, goodness me. It feels finer than you expect it to be because of the way that it looks, but has a softness to it that is surprising.
And yet a strength as well.
Yes.
Apparently, it's really, really hard wearing. And they sell bison socks for like machine-made socks made out of the bison stuff on their stall. They're quite and it's from a pair of socks, but it's apparently really, really hardy, really hard wearing, and incredibly warm as well. It's apparently 12 times as insulating as merino.
Oh wow.
And yet it has like 3 or 4 times the wicking properties of getting moisture away from the skin. So a lot of people, she says that they have the yarn fair aspect of their business, but they also have they cater to sports people. They have a sort of the girly side and the manly side. Again, gender stereotyping, but you know what I mean. And when they're selling to people like fishermen, obviously things get wet. You can kind of wring it out and it's almost dry.
Wow.
It just sort of has this water repelling property to it. It is just lovely. It feels like it's going to be strong. I don't think they're going to make socks out of it. I think that'd be lace weight socks. Really, who's got the time in their life for that? But I think it's going to be maybe a hat.
It's lovely. It's
maybe a really hat.
It's quite baffling, I think.
Yeah, it's an enigma of a yarn,
Yeah.
and I really, really love it.
In a good way.
And it does. I mean, even just holding it now, it's making my hand feel warm. I think if I were to hold it with another type of yarn, I'm not going to show you which one because I don't want to be sort of looking like I'm being negative about any of my purchases, but my hand definitely feels warmer just holding this one. Really, really interesting. I love it. And then there was one other purchase that I made. What's the time? Clock there. Oh, I better. Do you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to pause this and I'm going to tell you all about this later because I do have to be somewhere else. So I'm going to pick this up and start recording again later on this afternoon. Abbie, will you still be with us?
I will.
Fabulous. We'll see you later. So we're back. Sorry about that little hiatus. Normally, as you know, I like to do unedited podcastery, but sometimes I waffle on for far too long and have to go and do other things. Other things are done and we're back, and I'm carrying on with the end of my roundup from Stash Enhancement from Edinburgh. The last thing I bought on the last day, I bought myself a kit for something rather fun. So I'll just show the picture, I might as well. Yeah. I bought this. This is a pattern called Nahani River, and it is a Fair Isle tank top, as we call it in the UK. Sweater vest, is it in America? I don't know. And inside the kit, it has the pattern for the tank top, and you can see it's a really nice design on it. I'm just reflecting on it, aren't I, really? Let me take it out of its cellophane. Yeah, it's a lovely, lovely design. It's not the sort of usual Fair Isle motifs. They seem to be a little bit more elaborate than a lot of the little crosses and snowflakes that you might usually see. And I think it's really, really pleasant. And I like the colours as well. And this kit has all of the yarn in the right colours for this particular colourway. So the yarn that it comes with is this. It's Jameson's Shetland Spindrift. I know it's a yarn brand that many of you will be very, very familiar with. And it comes with, I think it's 23 balls or something. It's quite a lot. What does it say on here? 21 25-gram balls. And I think there's about 8 different colours. We've got this one, which is called Green Mist, which is sort of more of a blue than I'd call that like pale blue, really. Then there's this one, which is Artichoke, which is a very nice earthy, grassy colour. And then we've got some navy, dark navy, according to the ball band, and that's pretty true to colour on camera there. It's that one, and then there's plenty of this, which definitely is blue, I guess, held up against the other one. If you can see, it's really blue, and that is called, what's that one? Highland Mist. I like that one. That gives its distinctive blue colour, I think. This one's a very interesting colour. This is called Yell Sound Blue, and it actually does have sort of yellowy flecks to it as well. I don't know if the yell is short for yellow, or whether it's something else, a reference that I'm not aware of. So I'm completely cut. Look, there's my special guest. There she is. There she's gone. There she is. That's a really nice colour. I like that one a lot. Have I got them all? No, here's another one that I haven't. This is Atlantic. That's really, really nice, deep, intense blue. I like that. That's probably all. Oh no, there's balls cascading everywhere and there's cats on the loose. It's not going to end well. Oh no, there's some storm. Oh look, there we are. Storm. It's kind of greys and blues all twirled together. So there's a whole heap of stuff in that bag, which I'm sorry, there's Aloysius has fallen down. Sorry, mate. Yeah, look at that. That big old bag of balls of lovely. And the reason I bought this is because I'm very aware that my stranded work is pretty poor. I say pretty poor, almost non-existent. I've barely done any in my life, even though one of the patterns, my eye Sanka little phone cozy, that is stranded, but that's basically about it. That and half of a Sanka glove, which to my shame is still languishing in a Ziploc bag in with my stash. It's very safe. It's all on scrap yarn. I will pick it up at some point, but I've never really done a great deal, and I think the reason for that is I've always been so involved with double knitting double knitting kind of has a lot of pros and not many cons. So I kind of think, why would I want to do any other type of colour work? You get the reversibility, you get the stretchability. It's so much more forgiving than stranded work for tension and gauge. I think that makes me lazy because I've never felt the need to perfect and work on my tension because I don't need to with double knitting so much. I mean, you can still row out with double knitting. If your pearls are a lot slacker than your knits, for example, then you will get sort of a ridged effect because you keep turning from one side to the other. Not if you're working in the round, but the difference is double knitting doesn't have any floats, so I don't have to worry about anything puckering on the back.
Yeah.
But I have decided that I do want this year to be my year of stranded. I think I've actually said that in the last section. Have I said it? Have I just repeated myself? If so, you've heard it twice. And that's the reason why I bought that kit. And it came from, I think they were called, Simply Shetland was the name of the stall that I went to, and their little motif is a very nice little puffin. And they mostly sold kits, fully made up and ready to go, and it was all, I think, in the Shetland yarns, which would make sense, of course. And it's not the sort of thing I would normally go out looking for in order to buy, but it caught my eye. I really liked the picture on the kit itself. I do want to improve my stranded work. Have you done much?
Yeah, I did a panda cowl.
Oh, that's right. Yeah,
Like
little
my-
pandas on it. Yeah.
Yeah,
Did you enjoy it?
I did enjoy it. I think it was because it changed very irregularly. It was good for working your back
Right.
quite well and working out how you would secure your floating.
Was it
wool
knitted in
and-
the round?
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Because this tank top is knitted in the round, and it's got steeks for the armholes and for the neck, and I've never done a steek before. I have no idea how to secure a steek. I mean, I know the theory of it, but I've never done it. I know that knitting doesn't tend to want to unravel horizontally, so
No.
it's pretty, and particularly with something like a Shetland, it's going to be really nice and grippy. So once I've knitted all the way up to the top, the bits that I'm going to be cutting will have kind of caught on themselves anyway. So I'm not too worried about that. And it's not that steeks frighten me. I'm more worried about me not being able to finish it neatly enough to make it look nice. I worry that I'll do a tatty job because I'm not very good at it, and that will upset me because the kit was, a fair bit. It was £63, which I don't think is too much. I'd certainly spend that much on a piece of knitwear anyway. I think that was not out of the way, and this is the one that I get to knit myself, enjoy, and brush up on my skills. So I think it's definitely well worth the money. But yeah, I don't know. Stranded work it's kind of something that eludes me a bit.
I think you also get I've not done much of it, but mostly that panda cow. But I liked almost finding my own way through it as well. And when you had a longer section that was all black and you had your loose white, and when do you pick that into it and stuff like that. So it was quite a nice kind of adventure into stranded work.
Because I worry about catching floats on the back. when I was on John's stall at Edinburgh, he's got a cowl which has got some pretty long floats on it, but honestly the back of his work, it's so beautiful. You could actually wear it inside out, which is unusual for stranded work. His floats are so even, the tension is so perfect across the back, it looks like it's its own design, which is amazing. And I just looked at that, and it nearly put me off buying the kit. I don't think the back of mine's ever going to look like that.
Yeah.
But it is a paid for pattern, so I'm not going to show it on screen, but the chart's kind of scary because there's no colours on the chart. It's just crosses or little black crosses on a white square or a blank white square, and all of the information about what 2 yarns to use is written up the side. So we'll just say Atlantic Storm, and one is for the main colour, one's for the motif colour. But see, there's no information. Experienced knitters would just know all this stuff automatically. There's no information about how to carry the yarns up the side, whether or not you're supposed to cut them every row, I know there's different ways of doing it, but what did the designer intend? What did the designer think would be the best way of doing it? So I think I'm going to have to brush up on quite a little bit of research on stranded work before I plough in.
Yeah.
I was the same with double knitting. When I discovered the art of double knitting, I was captivated by it, but I didn't start doing anything until I'd watched probably hundreds of YouTube videos, because I knew that people had different ways of doing stuff, and I didn't want to just go with whatever I found first, because that might not be the way that suited me. I wanted to check out all the options. I think that's partly how my brain works. I need to know that I've got it covered, and then I can make an informed decision about what I think is going to work for me. And that's when I started, and I found the doing of it easy because I'd already built up quite a bank of knowledge in the background, and I think I'm probably going to have to do the same with that.
Yeah.
So that's all the yarny stash enhancement, but there are a few other things as well. While I was up there, I ran into the lovely Gemma, who I first met when she took part in the very, very first double knitting class I took at Wild and Woolly. And she really enjoyed it, I think, and she came back for a second class I did on two-handed brioche. And so we got to know each other quite well through that. And at the time I was doing the teaching, she was just setting up a company for herself called The Little Grey Girl. And she sells bags and I think stitch markers and notion pouches and things on, I believe it's on Etsy. I will check, I will put the information right here. And she, at the end of the festival, she came over just to say cheerio, and she handed me a little gift. And the little gift is a little bag, and do you know, it's the one thing. Abbie, chat to everybody.
Hello everybody. Nathan has been extremely busy clearly at the Edinburgh Yarn Festival, which was great. So I hope you also get inspired with how inspired he has been with all of his wool and exploring different wools from animals like the bison, which is exciting. So
you can okay. I'll come back.
I
was just gonna let her
picking him up really.
Well, this is the little bag. It's really, really lovely. I love the fact that it's in a tartan. Although Gemma's did say to me, it's not a proper tartan. It's not an official one. I said, but I don't care. It was a gift from Edinburgh, from Gemma, but in Edinburgh, and it's really lovely. I've got in here. Well, I'll get on to what's in here in a moment because it's just one of my whips. But I've already moved into it. And it's a perfect little size for a sock project. I quite like the fact that it's kind of pencil case shaped rather than a lot of bags tend to be quite tall. I just really like it. It's got a nice boxy bottom edge, but it's not too wide. It's just really nice. Nice little grip handle, so I can sort of wander around and stick it on 2 fingers while I'm knitting away and knit from it. I do like a bag with a handle, I have to say.
I do too.
Because I do knit on the move quite a lot, and inside it's a very, I'm going to try not to show you what's in there, it's a very neutral grey fabric, and it's very, very nicely put together. It's very neatly sewn, it's very tidy. I'm incredibly pleased with it, and it's got I don't know, it just feels nice. Squeeze it out.
Actually. Oh yeah.
The fabric's kind of tweedy, isn't it? It feels
but not as harsh as the softness of the material, but
It's nice. It's really nice. So Gemma,
Yeah.
thank you very much. And if anybody is interested in looking at what other things she's got, I mean, clearly this is going to appeal to me because it really is very sort of neutral. I was having a conversation with someone online who was asking my opinion about what sort of stuff will appeal to male knitters, and of course there is no answer to that. There's as many opinions out there as there are male knitters, and some male knitters will really like flowers and pixies and fairies and pink and rainbows and sky, and some people will want cars and beer mats and trains and and superheroes, and some people won't like any of that, and that's what's really interesting. I really like this because it isn't anything specific. It's not fan fiction based. It's not sci-fi. It's just a really nice, attractive but fairly simple pattern. And for me, that's a winner. That's a real winner. So Gemma, thank you very much. You couldn't have chosen a more appropriate little gift for me, and I thank you for it. So there was that. And I've got 2 more bags to show you as well. Now these 2 bags are also a gift from a lovely lady called Woolly Cricket on Ravelry. She's Woolly with 1 L. I do that all the time. I always spell people's names on here, knowing that I'm going to be putting them on the screen anyway. And so I think I'm being helpful, but I'm just sort of belt and braces. So Woolly Cricket, who is known as Cricket, I did ask whether she had another name that she would like to be known as, and she said she probably wouldn't answer if she heard her real name being spoken because she's been known as Cricket for so long.
Wow.
And actually I still don't know what her name is, but she lives in America and she's been a watcher of the podcast for a long time. So hello Cricket, it's lovely to see you on here. And she decided that she wanted to offer a gift as a giveaway to a lucky podcast viewer, and I was more than happy for her to do that. And I said to her, would she rather keep hold of the gift in America, because there's quite a strong likelihood that whoever wins will come from the US, bearing in mind what my demographic of watchers is. But she said, well, I'd like to send you one anyway. So she actually sent 2 bags through, one which I'm delighted to say I'm going to keep, and the other one is I'm going to give as a giveaway. But she's also got one in reserve in the US, just in case there's an American recipient, which I don't know yet. And they're really, really lovely. They're her own design, and she does sell them on Etsy, but I don't think she uses it as it's not a business, it's much more of a hobby for her. And I think they're both gorgeous. Very unusual shape bag. They're completely square, and they're very nice. I'm not sure which one to show first. I did show them to Ben. They're very different. I showed them to Ben, and he said, well, clearly you're going to be keeping that one. And I think it's probably not the one that people might automatically assume that I'm going to keep, but he was right, and I am. And here they are. Here's the first one. So it's got lovely sort of vintage car print on the top half of it, and then the bottom half is this sturdy plain canvas. They're really, really sort of thick, durable. That might even be waterproof at the bottom, I don't know, but I'm not going to put it to the test, but it's certainly going to be nice and protective for any project you've got on the go. It's also got 2 grommets there, so if you're wanting to knit socks out of it, and particularly if you're wanting to do 2 at a time socks, as long as you set it up right from the beginning and push the ends of the yarn through the holes, then it'll keep your 2 balls from getting muddled up and from tangling, which is a very useful idea. It's got a little pull there for the zip that goes across the top, and it's got a lovely generous hand strap, which I'm a big fan of, and it's really lovely. Can you see the shape of it? It's sort of, the ends are very, very square, and it's quite a big size. It would definitely do 2 at a time socks, but possibly even a small scarf project or something like that, which is really, really lovely. And of course, perfect for stuff for the boys with its car logos on. I really like them. Some of these are old sort of vintage American trucks. Lovely. Fantastic. But it's not the one I'm going to keep. Oh, I haven't shown you the inside. Cars being the theme on the outside, travel being a theme all the way through, the inside fabric is fabulous. It's these old maps. I really, really love it. So this one's going to be the prize giveaway. Let me turn it completely inside out so you can see. It looks amazing. It's an old world map goodness knows from when, but it's got all sorts of. It's 8,400 miles and 12 days to get from Osaka to somewhere on the other side of the seam. Seam, not the seam. That would be obvious. So I don't know yet what I'm going to... I haven't decided what I'm going to do for the giveaway. Maybe we could think about that while we're doing this. So that's going to be the giveaway prize. And the one that I'm keeping is really eccentric. Ben loves it. It's so brilliantly 70s. Look at that! It's the same design of actual bag, although it's got a bit of a shoulder strap, which is going to be great for, again, knitting on the go, which I really like, and I've already moved into it with another of my whips, which I'll show you in a moment. Again, it's got the 2 grommets, which are really nice feature there if you want to be knitting 2 at a time socks and want to stop your balls from tangling up, because heaven knows no one likes it when their balls tangle up. But it's really lovely. I really love these colours. It's going to bring a touch of 70s sunshine and glamour to any rainy grey day, and it is raining now. It is still flaring a little bit on the light here, but you'd never know because it's actually raining outside. I don't quite understand how this much light is coming in, but I'll stop waffling on about it. The inside of this bag is also it matches the strap, so it's really lovely, sort of mottled blue purple colour. But you can't have it, it's mine. So this one, thanks to the very generous spirit of Woolly Cricket, is going to be coming to a very lucky recipient. And because it's such a special gift, I don't think it's going to be enough for me to just say to people, I'll open up a thread, stick a post in it, and I'll draw a random number at the end of it. I'm going to actually make you jump through some hoops for it.
Good.
There is, as you know, in me a fascination with different people's knitting techniques, and I am going to ask anybody who would like to enter the draw for this, I'm going to ask you to video yourselves knitting from whatever perspective and camera angle you want to do, whatever your setup, whatever's easiest for you, and upload it to YouTube and then post that in the thread. So I know that might exclude some people who don't have access to that kind of stuff, and for that I apologise, but it's a very special gift, and I do want it to go to someone who really wants it, and therefore you're going to have to do a little bit of work. So I'm going to open up a thread. I have had a thread which is all about techniques and stuff. If you've already uploaded a video to that, feel free to post the same link in the new thread, but the new thread will be specifically for the giveaway for this. So all you need to do is, you don't have to talk, you don't have to say anything. It's not about sort of showing off personality. It genuinely is just about showing off how you knit. Abbie, is this your entry? Is you doing it
okay.
now? Okay. I might edit a little bit out of this. Go really close to the camera. This is how Abbie knits.
Oh, I'm under pressure now.
Yeah. So how do you tension your yarn? It's sort of wrapped around
kind
several
of around
fingers.
there, so. But it changes for pearls as well, because I get tangled up. I think I've dropped a stitch, but it's fine.
I could watch this kind of thing. Genuinely, I can watch people knitting all day.
It's kind of hard knitting in the air.
It is hard knitting in the air. It's really tough trying to keep stuff on camera.
Yeah.
So I will edit that bit out, and we can post that as your entry into the giveaway. You never know, I might just be...
Oh my!
Would you like that? I mean, it's gorgeous.
Yeah, it's really nice. I like the vintage.
It's motorbikes as well. No motorbike.
I think the map inside is brilliant.
I know, it's fab. You almost want to turn it inside out.
Yeah.
So yes, I will open up the thread there. It's just feel free to... with Ravelry, if you don't already know how to, there is a little icon above the editor where you type your message if you're adding a post to a thread. And it looks like a little TV screen. If you click on that, and then a little box pops up, and you can paste the URL, the address of your YouTube link in there, and then it'll display on the page as the video, which is great because it means that people don't always have to move move backwards and forwards to YouTube between Ravelry. They can just watch it there and then on the page. That's ideal, but if you can't manage that, and that's perfectly okay, just stick a link down as long as we can access it to have a look at it. If not, if anything doesn't work for any reason, I will keep tabs on that, and I'll contact people and say, this link's not working, is there another way we can get to see your video? So I hope that people from all around the world will do it. And I'm not just talking about people who have an unusual way of knitting, like my friend James, but I'm just really, really interested to see how people wrap the yarn around their fingers, how they manipulate that yarn, whether they're flickers or throwers, or whether they drop and catch, whether it's left-handed continental, whether it's left-handed throwing like James, but I'll be really interested to see if anyone out there is actually another left-handed thrower. But I just want to see what people are doing. We might have a little statistics tally up at the end and get some interesting criteria and knowledge out of it. So there we are. That's how to do it. This could be yours just by showing us how you knit. Look at that. If I put it up there, the room goes dark. If I put it down there, the room goes light.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Weird. So there we are. Cricket, thank you so much. I really, really love these bags, and this one is just gorgeous. So that's it really for stash enhancement. I think we should move on to whips. We've already seen Abbie's, we've seen it up close and personal, we've seen her knitting on it, but what am I knitting? I'm knitting several things actually. I'm still knitting under, and will be for a while, so I'm about to embark on some fairly large scale projects. So the whips section of this podcast might not change very much over the next few episodes. There may not be much to add to it. However, I'm still working on my Piano number 3 scarf, which is getting a little bit longer. It's a bit tangled up because it's just been stuffed in a bag for ages. There's not a great deal more of it, to be honest. I think I was about here when I last recorded. So this is the third. You all know this already, but in case you're a new watcher, and I wouldn't want to assume that everybody is a returning viewer, then this is the third in a series of 3 double knitted scarves that I'm making based on the Space Filling Curve by Giuseppe Piano, who was I think 18th century mathematician from Italy, and Giuseppe probably gave that away. And it's using the same design, the same sort of actual physical pattern, but it's created in a very different way. I'm actually knitting it on the bias, as you can see from, if that's the way the scarf is, you see the rows are going completely diagonally against the pattern. And the pattern, when it's all blocked, will hopefully sit nicely flat with right angles like that. But at the moment, because cables, they're not really at 90 degrees from each other on knitting, particularly with a double knitting gauge, which tends to be a little bit squatter than it and wider, whereas stranding, this is another thing, difference between stranded and double knitting. The gauge is completely different. With stranded knitting, it's essentially square stitches, whereas double knitting, they're wider and shorter. Something one learns. That's not going to be true for everybody. Before you all shout out and say, well, my double knitting gauge is square, it might be, I believe you. But this is the reverse side of it, and this is the front side of it. It's knit with more John Dunballum. He's getting lots of plugs today. It's his Cherish base, and the orange is really, really gorgeous. This has got, I forget the actual, I haven't got the ball band here. There's cashmere in it. I think it's nylon as well, but it's like 10% cashmere. It's really lovely.
Is this one you bought?
I bought quite a while ago. Yeah, with you, and then I got John to do the custom dye for the black. It's so lovely. So it's been sitting in my stash for well over a year, isn't it? Yeah. Waiting for me to give it a go, and that was because I knew exactly what I was going to do with it. It was one of those projects where I genuinely had the project in mind, but it took me quite a long time to just let the information filter through my brain about exactly how I was going to do this and how I was going to work it out, and then I finally got around to charting it, and here it is. So it's a little bit longer. I'm not going to lie, it's quite a slow project. So the cabling is quite labour intensive. That's not to put anybody off, because I know that there's many knitters out there who quite like a challenge, but this is definitely process knitting rather than product knitting. It's going to take quite some while for me to get through it, because as you all know as well, I do like a nice long scarf. I don't like a scarf that just sort of comes to here, crosses over once under a jacket, and that's it. I like 8 feet long, wrapping it round. I suspect this one won't get quite that long, but I'm very happy for it to be as long as I can possibly cope with. So the Van Gogh is the colourway, or Van Gogh if you're American, or Van Gogh if you're English, but if you're Dutch it's Van Gogh, or Van Gogh. That's the colourway for the orange, and the black was a custom dye. So John is very happy to do custom dyes. If you know you like a base of his and you like the kinds of colours that he has, but don't see anything that you're looking for, then just give him a call, email him or something like that, and I'm sure he will very happily give you a custom dye job, which is amazing. Makes it all that little bit more exclusive. So that's one of my whips. I've got another one, I'm going to come back to that one. I'm going to go back to this one. People will have seen this on Instagram. It's just a vanilla sock. It really is just a vanilla sock, but the yarn is knitting up so well. Really, really enjoying it. It's getting quite dark. Still flaring on the lights, yeah. With our matching hand gestures then. I'm just going to turn some lights on in here and see what that does, because I do want to show some colours.
We're flaring even more, but it is brighter.
It is brighter. That's okay. I just want to show some of this because I think it needs a little bit more.
A bit ghostly.
I'm going to turn the lights off after I've done this. But this yarn is really, really rather nice. It's the stuff I bought in Hobbycraft. It was dirt cheap. It's Regia 4-ply.
I've used Regia
sock
before.
yarn.
Yeah.
Bulletproof stuff. It lasts nuclear apocalypse. But the colour is just so... I didn't really expect it to look like that. I thought it would look a bit more streaky and kind of less spotty mottly, but it's really, really fun. I'm thoroughly enjoying it. And this is another attempt. So I'm actually writing down everything I'm doing. It's another attempt for me to perfect my recipe for the German short row heel flap and gusset toe up socks. That's a catchy little title, isn't it? So clearly I started with the Judy Becker's Magic Cast On, did some toe increases up to 72 stitches, working around, and I'm now about halfway through the gusset increases. I don't know if you can see on there my little line of gusset increases, and it's going rather well. It's kind of fun. I don't need to think about it. But the one little tip that I did put on Instagram is this tail here. It's actually, the tail was on the inside, but after I've done a few rounds of the toe, after I've done the Judy Becker's Magic Cast On, which I think is brilliant, then I always leave that tail, I just poke it out the side so that it shows me where the start of the round is so I don't get lost. Rather than using a clip-on marker or something like that, which can sometimes distort the stitch that it's attached to. That's just a really neat way. It doesn't need weaving in on this side or anything like that, because it is actually just pulled through. If I turn the sock inside out, I can actually just grab hold of it and pull it through like that, and then weave it through on the inside as normal. But I'm not going to do that now, because then I would lose it, and that would negate the point of doing it in the first place. So that's those. These balls are 50 grams each, and being toe up, I've got 2 of them. So I'm just gonna keep going and see how long the sock gets. I quite like a long sock. The older I get, the more I like to have my.
Unlike me, I like a short sock.
Are you a little sort of anklet type thing?
Yeah, kind of just over the ankle, I think.
And do you work mostly toe up with socks, or are you cuff down?
Cuff down. I want to do a toe up because I want to do a kind of scrap yarn sock.
Yeah.
So kind of and obviously there's going to be lots of changing sizes of needles and stuff like that depending on the wool, but kind of having this kind of up the leg sock.
Oh, really quite long?
Yeah, really quite long. Of just random pieces of wool.
And do you have enough random pieces of wool from stuff that you've used already? Or do you...
I've got a fair amount of stuff that I wouldn't use for a project.
Because a lot of people in... God, look at this lighting's got to go. Chat to my friends, Abbie, chat to them all.
I think the idea of the toe-up sock with scrap yarn wool also came from... There's a film called It Follows, which is a sort of horror movie, but it's very, very good. I recommend it. But she has these socks which are kind of look very much like random different pieces of wool, and I just thought, why not put that into practice and see if you can do that by hand. Well, you can do it by hand, but it just also means it's a challenge for me to learn toe up.
And there's lots of people out in knit world who will know this already, that quite a lot of people are making sock yarn blankets out of little mitered squares. So you knit the squares, but you don't sort of have to then sew them all together. There's a pattern out there where you sort of knit them onto each other.
Yeah.
And that's a great way of using up stuff. But people are not just using up things like that. There's a big trend, I don't know if you're aware of it, for little mini skeins of things.
No.
So sort of like 10 or 20 grams. Pretty much like the little cakes that of the grey that I showed earlier. But you can buy them in a whole range of colours. So if you are doing a project that has lots of different colours and you don't have enough scrap, you can actually buy small amounts of it rather than having to spend £20 on a skein that you're only going to use 10 yards of.
Yeah, I just did some baby socks, and it was like a 25-gram ball, and you could just make 2 little baby socks out of that.
Marvellous,
That's
marvellous. So that's those socks. They're kind of fun. I mean, it does mean I've got to the stage now where I'm not really knitting them on the go. I'm very yellow in that light now.
And I'm still very white.
I'm just bad lighting
such
today.
a white person.
It's getting really dark. It's only, what is it? It's 4 o'clock?
Yeah.
And it's not. It shouldn't be getting dark.
Oh no, it's 10 to 5. So slightly later than
we are getting there. But yes, I can't really knit these much on the go now because I've got to the stage where I am writing down everything that I'm doing because I want to make sure that it's not a pattern but a recipe. So hopefully it'll be a little bit of maths and you can find out whatever stitch count you're using, the pattern will work for whatever size sock you want to make. So that would be great because you could use it then for any yarn weight at all. If you want to do DK socks or Aran weight socks, obviously your stitch count would be much less, but the recipe should still work. That's my plan. Other works in progress. Right, well, I'm going to bleed FOs into works in progress a little bit because I want to show the finished object I've got before I show the whip, because the whip is a version of the finished object. That makes no sense. I'll carry on. So you'll have seen last episode the hat that I've been knitting for Dan. It's knitted out of the same yarn as Aloysius's jumper, and for those of you who may not remember, Dan Jones sent it to me after I appeared on their podcast in Knit or Forfeit. He and I both drew on our round, so we decided after that we would both do each other's forfeits. And in fact, while I've been typing this, I've just seen a message come through from Dan on the phone. We're going to be getting together tomorrow via Skype and or FaceTime. Other brands are also available. And I'm going to be teaching him how to do double knitting. He's getting a special one-on-one session, whether he likes it or not. So that's happening tomorrow. But his original forfeit for me was going to be knit a particular type of hat. He hates slouchy hats. He absolutely hates slouchy hats. A particular slouchy hat out of the worst wool that he could find. I really like it.
Yeah.
It is dreadful acrylic, but this is the hat that I decided to knit for him. So this is a hat that's going to him. Golly, this lighting it's almost worth not putting it on again. Abbie, you're on shot. You're in. I've never had this problem before.
Alright.
It's a little bit further away. So this is the hat that I've knitted, and it started off just as a bit of a joke, and it was just going to be a one-off for Dan, as a gift, as a thank you, as a punishment, I don't know, call it what you will, just so that I could give him back the yarn that he'd sent to me. Having knitted Aloysius's jumper, there was plenty left. But actually, it's developed into a pattern that I really kind of like. If I show you the crown, it's got these fabulous spirals in it, which looks like some kind of the arms of a galaxy. I really like it. And the lines of yarn overs travel round the entire hat, spiraling all the way down to the brim or up to the crown, whichever direction you're going in. And it's an interesting type of brim. It looks like an ordinary rib, which it is, but it's a 2x1 rib. So there's only one purl stitch, which means that it sort of hangs together quite well that way. But if you fold it upwards, and this is how I would probably choose to wear the hat. If you fold it upwards, it's got a really nice generous brim on it, but you get, if I can get it to focus, you just get the one line of stitches because the purl stitches are knit on the back. And I think that's quite an unusual texture to have on a hat brim, and then you get the spirals working their way round. It's just alternating panels of 2x1 rib and reverse stocking stitch with some decreases and yarn overs separating and creating the spiral. So it's a really, really fun hat. It's very generously proportioned. I'm only going to write it up for one size. I think if people want to make a smaller one, then they feel free to go down to smaller yarn weight or smaller needles. This was done with the DK. It's 120 stitches, and it's so it's quite roomy. But I've got a big head, and it's nice to have it quite sort of comfortable. You can, sorry Dan, you can also wear it as a slouch. Dan was actually talking about on his podcast how he hates it where people put the little tuft of hair out, but that's the way you have to do it. So that's the sort of the slouch effect on it, and it's just a fairly standard slouchy hat.
Yep.
So knowing that this was not necessarily going to be everybody's taste in yarn, I did say that I would, to myself, that I would knit a second one. I'm going to take photographs of this one anyway, because it's always nice to have sort of different options within a photo set, and I will photograph this one, but then I'm going to post this one to Dan, and he can have that as my special gift, the one-off, certainly the original. It hasn't got a name yet. I'm toying with the idea of different names because of the spiralling, and because I knitted it for Dan, I'm kind of thinking I might call it Dan the Plughole. Which is probably not a pun that works in America. So it might be Dan the Plughole, or it's the Cockney version, or it might be something I call it like out of control because it's spiraling out of control. I don't know. Okay, I will open a poll on Ravelry, and please hop over there and you can decide whether it should be Dan the Plughole or Out of Control. Those are the two options. I'll open a little thing you can vote on there, and I'll get that up and running before.
So not Nitty McNickface.
Not Nitty McNickface.
Sorry.
For those of you who don't know, in the news at the moment, there's the NERC, which is the National Environmental Research Campaign, or something like that. They've got a new boat from which they're going to be conducting their experiments, and they had opened up an online poll for suggestions of what to name the boat, and by far and away the most popular is Boaty McBoatface.
Brilliant.
People are so naughty. They were genuinely hoping for something inspiring and uplifting, and that shows the motivation of who they are, environmental campaigners. Yep. Boaty McBoatface. In fact, I believe the person who suggested that has actually taken to Twitter to apologise.
Yeah, he has apologised.
Because it's sort of really skewed all of their statistics. So not Nitty McNickface.
Not Nitty McNickface.
No, not Hattie McHatface. No. Dan the Plughole or Out of Control. I will leave it up to you to decide, and whichever one gets the most will be the name of the pattern. So there I was saying that I wanted to knit a second one. I'd also said on Instagram, did people think that this was the kind of pattern that would be... Basically, I just wanted to know if it was going to be worth writing it up, or should I just leave it as this one-off. A lot of people said yes, they did, and I genuinely wasn't fishing for compliments. I just wanted to know if there was interest. There's interest, people like it. So one of the people who follows me on Instagram is my nephew. Now, my life is compartmentalised into lots of different places. I'm an actor.
Yeah.
But I have different sets of social media for my acting life, and I'm a knitter, and I have different sets of social media for that, different accounts. And the two audiences just don't mix. There's no crossover at all. So to have my nephew commenting on my knitter's Instagram was a little bit odd. But he said, I want one now. He's 17. And so I thought, okay. So I said, okay, Lewis, as it happens, I do need to knit a second one, but what colour would you like? Thinking how amazing it would be to have a real range of colours.
Yeah.
Blue, he says. Blue. Blue, he says. I know this is kind of a greeny blue, but it's blue, cyan. But he specifically asked for the Twitter logo blue. So after taking some suggestions from people, again, through the medium of Instagram, this is brilliant. I said, does anyone out there know of any decent DK weight yarns that would work in as Twitter logo blue? And loads of people sent answers back. And this is, I went for the Cascade 220. I have it here. This is in Cricket's bag. The Cascade 220, which is their DK weight, and it's called... I can't remember what the colour is. I can't remember. I think it's just I think it's just Asia, as in Azure, not ASIA. But it's really nice, and I think that's pretty damn close to the Twitter logo blue. It might be a little bit darker, but it's great. And I just got that from Wool Warehouse online. It's fairly cheap. It's quite a solid feel. I've not worked with it before. I've worked with the 440, I've worked with the fingering weight before, but never with the 220. I quite like it. It's not the softest, smoothest yarn in the world. It's got a little bit of, if you are sensitive, it might cause a bit of an itch. Ben, of course, touched it, went, ah! And dropped it, because he really is ridiculously sensitive to it. So I have my current whip. The long and the short of that big old winded story is that I started last night, I cast on for the second in the hat of either down the plug hole or out of control. And I slightly changed things up. On the first one, I just did an ordinary knitted on cast on. It's hard to get that focus there. But I wasn't sure I really liked it. So this one, I've done a cable cast on, and it is very different. I don't yet know what I prefer. What do you think, Abbie? There's the two together. That's the cable cast on. It's a lot more visible. The cable cast on has a nice sort of twisted rope effect, which I do like, and that one sort of just ends. Do you have a preference?
I probably would go with the knitted on.
Interesting. Abbie prefers knitted on. I think I might be swayed by the cable cast on. So I will probably just say cast on 120 stitches.
Decide your cast on.
Yeah, exactly. Choose your favourite cast on. It wouldn't hurt if it was a long tail cast on. Wouldn't make any difference. So whatever it's going to be. But I did that last night. That was about an hour and hour and a quarter knitting. That's 10 rows of 120 stitches. So I wasn't really concentrating, and there was one bit where I had to rip a little bit back because I'd got out of sync. I was watching the television, wasn't looking at my knitting, and got out of sync with my knits and purls. But again, you can see on the back there's that nice sort of 2x1 effect for what it'll be like when it gets turned up, and I think it's going to be quite fun. It's a slightly thicker yarn, but it's not making for a hat that feels any bigger.
Oh, that's
in
interesting.
fact, oddly, this one, wearing this and showing off my balding bits here and here, just nicely. Actually, this feels like it might be a little bit snugger than the original, even though this yarn is thicker. It's the same needles, the same knitter. Who knows? Maybe this is a little bit more, oddly, a little bit more balanced. This is acrylic, by the way. This is acrylic. Ben picked this up and went, ooh, lovely and soft. Like, really? You are having a laugh. So that's the hat, as yet unnamed, but will be very soon. And I believe that's all of my whips. It's kind of, it's the FO as well. Now I'm also, do you know what, this yarn, there was so much of it left. It was a 100-gram ball. I knitted the hat, I've got that much left. I knitted his jumper. So it's all gone crazy, and there's loads of it. I am working on other things as well. Now, when I was chatting to Kathy of Stitch Mastery Genius up in Edinburgh, she and I were talking about various things in double knitting that are or are not possible. And I have long maintained that my knitting nemesis is the Vikkel Braid. I was having a conversation with two knitters up in Edinburgh about the Vikkel Braid, and it seemed that we were talking about two different things. So obviously in knitting sometimes there's different terminology for the same thing, sometimes there's the same terminology for two different things. Hence, this is knitted in DK weight, but this scarf is in the DK technique. And it's double knitting, and it's two completely different meanings. Now, I was looking at what I know to be a Vikkel braid is with one colour knitting where you have a horizontal line of V's that work their way across the row rather than up in columns as normal, and it sits proud and it's really, really attractive. But what they were describing as a Vikkel braid was what I would call a Latvian braid or an Estonian braid, which is the ones you sometimes see around the cuffs of stranded mittens, which is done with two colours wrapping around each other as you strand them on the front, and it makes this lovely little sort of barber pole effect. I'm calling the Vikkel braid the line of V's that go that way. So that's just to clear up any confusion. But I have said that I don't believe that anything is possible in single face knitting that's not possible in double knitting, except the Vikkel Braid, because it's been a real nightmare to try and do it. And one of the reasons is, if you're thinking of the Vikkel Braid going one way on the front, you turn it around the other way, the V's would have to go the other way. So you could sort of like separate the two layers and do work one row on the front, but then if you work the other row on the back, then your V directions would be doing that rather than matching each other where they should. And it drove me mad. So in talking to Kathy from Stitch Mastery about this, I was getting her to try one out, a normal Vikkel Braid, so she could see it. So we had a bit of scrap knitting, and she was following some instructions, and I mistakenly said, oh no, instead of going into the back through the back, you're supposed to go in through the front, but through the back loop of the stitch, but from the front of the knitting. And when she did that, her Vikkel Braid, even though she was working on the facing side, her Vikkel Braid was falling to the back of her knitting. And suddenly I thought, do you know what, I now believe this might be possible. I've always said that it's not possible to do the Vikkel Braid, but one day I'll crack it. So it's suddenly I had a glimmer of hope that this might be something that is doable, because I then thought, well, it can be done on the other side. The problem with the way she was doing it was because she was working it on the knit side, there were purl bumps showing through on the back, which I don't want on the double knitting, because double knitting has stocking stitch on both sides. But it did make me think, so I started looking into this, and on the train on the way home from Edinburgh, I knitted this tiny swatch. When I'd finished the hat, I had some of this yarn left over. And here is the Vikkel Braid. So you can see this bottom line of stitches works its way across. It's really, really pretty. I do love the effect. And then there's another line that I did across the top. You will notice, if you are very eagle-eyed, that the bottom, the V's are facing this way, and the top line, the V's are facing this way. So although they're both on the same side of the fabric, they are knitted to go in opposite directions. Can you see?
Yes.
So one's going that way, one's going that way. This excited me so much. I cannot tell you, and as I put on an Instagram post, it excites me more than I could ever convey to a non-knitter. I'll let you into a little secret. The top line goes the other way because I worked it on the wrong side. Normally, this is just stocking stitch, so it's purl bumps on the back, nice tidy V's on the front. Normally, the Vikkel Braid would be worked with the right side facing you, and it appears on the right side. I did an odd number of rows after the Vikkel Braid, and then I was working on what to me is the wrong side here, and I'd worked out how to do it on the purl side. Now actually, I've since discovered that there's something else about this which isn't quite right and needs fixing, but it means that if it's possible to do it on the purl side, it should be possible to do it in double knitting. And it is, ladies and gentlemen. I am very, very proud to show you the worst swatch in the world. This is a swatch that has been used for many, many different things, and I'm halfway through a row anyway. It's a double tuck stitch, it's double brioche, it's double knitting, it's some Vikkel Braids as well. Now it's a mess because I haven't done anything to it or anything like that, but if I show you on the camera here, you can see this bottom line here. There's a Vikkel Braid working its way on the yellow side, and if I turn it over, there's its counterpart on the blue side. Yes, it is possible, and I nearly wet my pants with happiness when I worked out how it could be done. I don't think anyone is ever going to want to do this. It's not fun.
No.
It's seriously not fun. It is so labour intensive. There's a lot of reordering pairs of stitches and sliding things backwards and forwards and bringing yarns backwards and forwards, working stitches in through the back and from all ridiculous kind of angles, but it is possible. What I noticed while I was doing it was that even in a proper Vikkel Braid, I've actually just undone some of this swatch, doesn't matter. In a proper Vikkel Braid, so this is done the normal way, if I look underneath it, the stitches in the row below are all twisted. And I didn't like that. it sort of didn't lie flat.
Yeah, I saw in the middle bit.
Yeah, you see that each stitch has a nozzle almost coming out of it. It doesn't need to be that way. And I only learnt that from doing this one. It was fairly impossible to get a true reversal of the technique because of the way the angle I had to go into one of the stitches from. So I did it the way that made more sense. And actually, on this one, there's no twisted stitches underneath.
No.
You see there?
Yeah.
So on the one that was worked on the purl side, if I can camera at all, there's no twisting of the stitches underneath. Which suddenly made me think, well, if it's possible to do it on that way, it must be possible to do it on the right way. So you can, with a lot of people don't even like Vikkel braids normally because they're labour intensive, but with even a bit more fiddling around, you can make it so that the stitches below are not twisted, and actually your Vikkel braid will lie a little bit flatter and a bit neater. I think if I were doing a normal Vikkel braid, I think it's such a, I'm just getting bored with saying the word now, but it is a really pretty, there's Viola, there she is, hello. It is a really, really pretty effect, and I might use it in some patterns because I do like it a lot. I might be tempted to do it my way without the twisting, because now that I know that the twist, that would itch in my brain and I'd know about it, but I quite like it as it is. So the joy is, it does work, it is possible. It probably is going to find its way into one of my double knitted patterns, but that's more for the fact that it can be done rather than because it's fun to do. And I also know there are knitters out there who really like a challenge.
Yeah.
And people like to do something which is ridiculously hard. You know, this is why you get people doing stranded things, crazy. Oh, there's a cat, she's looking at all this knitting which is down here. There's a mess of knitting on the floor now.
I'll be back.
You're going to catch the cat.
I'm going to go get my husband.
Oh, okay. So the long and the short of that is, I've been waffling on for ages, but it is possible to do. The only other thing that I want to show you before I go, because I know this is a long one, I've had so much to talk about. I've been doing some spinning. My friend Hilary, she and her son Jago were collecting yarn. Oh, that's a lie. They collected some sheep's wool in a field on a walk that they went on together, and what was really, really charming was they gave it to me if I wanted to do anything with it. Well, it sat for nearly a year in a bag on my wardrobe, and it's about 25 grams of stuff. So once I'd washed it and picked out a load of old rubbish, there was maybe 22 grams worth of fibre. Now, I'm not an expert spinner, I don't have an expert spinning drop spindle, but I've done it, I've plied it, and here it is. So this is some unknown sheep variety that came straight off a field and has been spun and plied. I'm actually not too displeased with it. It's quite fine. The lumps and bumps are mostly because the fibre didn't card particularly well, and sometimes I'm not too great with my texture anyway, but there are little lumps which I can pluck off. They're not really part of it, but I'm quite happy with it. And the weird thing is, I thought this was the worst piece of spinning in the world, because I tend to spin quite thin, and hello, there's somebody else coming in, hello. I tend to spin quite thinly, and I've over twisting things, and it was really, really like cheese wire and really tough and nasty. But having plied the two ends of the singles together, and I learnt to do it right. Have you heard of an Andean plying bracelet?
No.
It's a way of wrapping yarn around your hand, so you can you can work from both ends at the same time, so you can find the middle. It's very, very clever. Having done that, it's actually not too bad. It's quite soft, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
It's all right. There's not a great deal. It'll be some accent knitting in
Something else.
in something stranded, perhaps, because stranded is what I'm doing this year, it would appear. But yeah, there's all sorts of fun things that I'm thinking I can do, and it's going to work its way back into a gift that I'm going to give back to Hilary, and I think it'll be quite fun to be able to present her with something that's been knitted with some fibre that she collected, and so she can see the process of it. It does smell. It doesn't. It's not even as sheepy as Rachel's Hebridean, but it does smell sheepy. I washed it just with washing up liquid and some very hot water to break down the lanolin. I had to learn quite a lot of stuff, but it was fun. So that's basically about it. I waffled on for way too long. Abbie, thank you so much for joining me. Will you come back and visit us again?
I will.
Marvellous. So you can see more of Abbie and her knitting at some later indeterminate date in the future. And for now, although this podcast is now a finished object, remember that life is a work in progress. Just take it one stitch at a time. Bye-bye.